The final 4 Disney Plus movies from 2020 that I have not gotten to review yet. We're going to talk right now about Safety, Godmothered, Black Beauty, and Clouds. Hey everybody, welcome to Dan Reviews It. My name is Dan, and we are going to talk Disney Plus. I've reviewed many of the Disney Plus movies so far this year. Earlier in the year, I did like Timmy Failure and Stargirl and a handful of the early releases. And then, of course, last week I put up a Soul review alongside Wonder Woman 1984, the 2 big Christmas Day releases. But there were a few movies that came out in the latter portion of 2020 that I just have not been able to get to yet until now. So we're going to talk about all of those in the order, the reverse order that they were released. So we're going to talk about the newest one first, which is Safety. But before we get to that, I do want to urge you to subscribe below. Hit that button there and hit the bell next to the subscribe button too if you want to get the notifications each time I put up a new video. And I do put up a lot of content on this channel, not just movie related, but a lot of TV stuff as well. Some old Disney stuff too. If you are a Disney fan, you're watching all of these old movies on Disney Plus, maybe like me, you can check out my Dan Does Disney reviews as well. We are going chronologically through, starting way back with Snow White, and right now we're currently in the mid 50s, but you can check those out too, and I have a playlist of that on my channel too if you want to watch those from the beginning. But anyway, let's get to this week's reviews of Disney Plus movies. These are the final ones that were released in 2020 that I have not gotten to yet. It's funny because Disney Plus sort of had 2 different types of films this year on the streamer in terms of new content. Some of them were specifically for Disney Plus, and then many of them were supposed to be released in theaters, like the one and only Ivan and Magic Camp. And because of course, COVID-19 and theaters being shut down, they did not do that. And Soul, of course, is one of those as well. But I think the majority of these were set for Disney Plus from the beginning. Maybe not all of them. I feel like there's probably one in here that was maybe going to be originally a theatrical movie, and then they just had to shift it. But let's talk about them. Like I said, we're going to go in reverse order of what is the newest. So there were a couple that came out in December, so we'll talk about those first. Safety is the first one of those, and this is a Disney biographical sports drama. They're very famous for those, dating back, decades. This one is about Ray McElrathbey, who is a Clemson University student, Clemson Tigers, and he is a football safety, but he's got a lot of internal issues at home with his family. He's got an addicted mother. He's got a younger brother who, I don't know, is maybe like 10 years old or something. I'm sure they say in the movie, but I think he's probably about 10, and he is like living most of the time just at home alone, or he's staying with friends of the mom who happen to be sort of drug dealers and all this kind of stuff. So they decide to grab him. Ray takes him unto himself and brings him to Clemson in the dorms illegally, against, not illegally, I guess, per se, but against all of the, protocols and procedures of the school, and, putting the football team in jeopardy and all of this stuff. And so what I thought was a football movie going into it, because that's, of course, the picture they show is him in the football helmet with his jersey, and he is holding up his little brother in the poster, but to me, I just saw like sports, and this movie is actually very little about football, which a lot of my favorite quote-unquote sports movies are. Like Jerry Maguire is one of my favorite movies of all time, and that is sort of a football movie, but realistically, it's a romance, it's a comedy, it's almost a buddy picture at some points too, with Tom Cruise and Cuba Gooding Jr. So yeah, there's football sort of as the backdrop, and that's, I think, what we have here as well. So Jay Reeves is playing Ray, and the little brother, Famar, is played by newcomer Thaddeus J. Mixon. And we see a few people in this movie that we've kind of, seen before. Two of the coaches I do recognize from a few other things. They're played by Matthew Glave and James Badgedale here. And we also have Corinne Fox, who is Jamie Foxx's daughter, playing Casey, who is love interest, sort of Ray. I'd say probably more than sort of, but it takes kind of a while to get there because the movie really isn't about their romance. It's about him and his brother, mostly, I would say. So this was a surprise to me. I really, like I said, I thought this was going to be a football movie, and it turned out to be so much more than that. And in fact, in the end credits, we see what became of these characters, and we saw Oprah introducing them on her show back in the day. Because it's fairly recent, but not recent enough that Oprah didn't have her own show. I think it was maybe from like 10 years ago or something that this story took place. But I was very, very impressed with this movie. First of all, the little kid who plays Famar, this Thaddeus J. Mixon, was great. And he actually reminded me of somebody, and I couldn't put my finger on it. So I was like, oh, I know I've seen this kid somewhere. So I clicked on his wiki, his IMDb. There's just nothing that I recognize. Very, very small roles. So I think maybe he was in like some commercials or something that I saw, but I know this kid from something, and he is a really good little actor, and their relationship is very realistic. The chemistry between the two is very relatable as brothers. Obviously, as we go down the journey, he's sort of putting his football team and football players in jeopardy that sort of find out along the way. And in fact, he takes his case all the way to the NCAA and tries to sort of have them bend the rules a little bit so he can give his brother a life, and so he's not, sort of shot through the foster system. It's a very heartwarming story, very touching. Like I said, the acting is good. The only thing I would say, though, about the acting is, look, I love Jamie Foxx. I'm a big fan. But his daughter, Corinne, she's just not quite there yet. And I'm not saying not on the level of Jamie Foxx. That would be very hard, but I don't think she's even at the level where she can convincingly do this role. She's okay, but considering most of her co-stars here are also fairly new actors, newcomers, I think she should be able to hold her own a little bit better with them, and she doesn't. And maybe partially because of that, the romance is by far the weakest element of this movie, I felt. Yeah, he's sort of putting her on the back burner anyway because he wants to care for his brother and focus on football and focus on school. He's still, this whole time, he's still got to get really good grades, which he ends up doing, despite everything going on around him. But because of that, I do feel like the romance is far and away the weakest plot of the film. But look, I guess they wanted to stay close to some sort of reality, and maybe this really did happen. This girl does exist. I don't know. But anyway, I think that we could have maybe not done without entirely, but either, I wouldn't even say devoted more time to it because I'm not sure that's what it needed, but it was just kind of generic, and like, we get it. You've got a lot going on. You're sort of blowing off this girl because at first you don't want her to know your brother's living there and da. But I think at the end of the day, you could have excised that from the movie entirely, and I don't think it would have been worse for wear. But overall, like I said, this was a pleasant surprise for me. I leave Safety with a B+. So a week before that came out, we had Godmothered, which is a fantasy princess comedy movie, I guess you could say. Not really princess, but sort of in a roundabout way, I guess. But anyway, this is starring one of my favorite up-and-coming comedic actresses, Jillian Bell, alongside, someone I always enjoy when I see her. She doesn't do a whole lot these days, but she, of course, started, 20 years ago almost. Wedding Crashers was, I guess, her really big break, but Isla Fisher is the other star of this movie. And essentially, we start this movie in the motherland, which is where fairy godmothers are training, and they've been doing the same thing for decades and maybe even centuries, and it's getting really old. Jane Curtin plays the head of that, the head godmother called Moira, and most of the people in the room, in the classroom, are just sort of bored with it. They are just sick and tired of the same studies every single time. But we have Jillian Bell as Eleanor Faye Bloomingbottom, and she is sort of the young buck, and she's really still got the gleam in her eye, and she really wants to become a good fairy godmother. But unbeknownst to her, they're about to close down the fairy godmother program and become tooth fairies, which is something she is not interested in. And we have June Squibb here as well, playing Agnes, who's sort of like the housekeeper or something. I don't know. I sort of forget what they described her as, but she is, sort of the head of everybody. Like I've been going through the Facts of Life TV show. She reminds me of the Mrs. Garrett. Like she's just sort of the sage advice giver and keeps everybody's secrets and all that sort of stuff. So the confidant of all. But she's also like, I don't know, she's hosting the Godmother radio show where she, has the morning announcements and all that kind of stuff. So whatever that is. But so Jillian Bell learns of this. Eleanor Faye Bloomingbottom learns that they're going to become tooth fairies. She's like, nope, I need to prove that I can do the godmother thing. I'm going to find somebody who needs a godmother. So she finds this letter from a little girl, saying that she wants to, have happiness and find her prince and all of this. It's from this Mackenzie Walsh. Well, when she wrote the letter 30 years ago, she was just a little kid, and now she's grown-up Mackenzie Walsh, played by Isla Fisher, like I said, and she has her career in this TV newsroom where they're doing all this sensational news. They're in last place on the network, and, she really wants to make her mark, and that's where Eleanor meets up with her. So it goes from there. We learn a lot about Mackenzie's life at home. She's got, a sister at home. She's also got a daughter. And it's interesting because we actually have two people in minor roles from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Mary Elizabeth Ellis, who plays the waitress in Always Sunny, plays the sister here. And then Artemis, who plays Artemis on Always Sunny, she is in here as well in a small role. So always kind of good to see some of the ancillary characters from Always Sunny getting some interesting work. And this movie actually is pretty darn funny. I mean, look, Disney sort of wrote the book on film versions of the Princess story and the Godmother story, and this obviously harkens back a lot to Cinderella specifically. They make several references to Cinderella in the film. They talk about singing mice and things like that. So it's sort of ripped out of the Disney playbook and pokes fun at it whilst still being, that type of a story. It's one of those things where it's very tongue-in-cheek, but at the same time it actually is a good godmother story. And they sort of did a similar thing to a more successful degree, I think, with Enchanted about 12 years ago, I think. And that was sort of in the same vein of an Isla Fisher, at the time, a very up-and-coming, hot actress, Amy Adams, and that was one of her first really big roles, too. And it has sort of notes of that throughout, but it definitely does forge its own path. I think, look, there's some things that are going to be predictable in a movie like this. I don't do spoilers for new movie reviews on this channel, but I think if you've ever seen any sort of fairy tale story from Disney, you sort of know a couple of the beats it's going to take, but there are some interesting elements to it as well. I think the whole we're going to shut the Godmother school down and we're going to become tooth fairies, and Jane Curtin involving herself then in trying to get Eleanor to return to the motherland, I think that adds an interesting wrinkle to it. There's, a little bit of a romance, obviously, as Eleanor is trying to get Mackenzie hooked up. It just so happens that one of the guys at the news station, his last name is Prince, so of course Eleanor hears that and it's like, okay, well, this is the one. And as well, we're seeing, Mackenzie try to balance her family, taking care of her daughter and everything, and for some reason she doesn't quite believe Eleanor for a little while, even though Eleanor is proving with some magic that yes, she is a fairy godmother, she can do this. There's no other explanation for it. She's still kind of like, all right, well, either way, whatever, I don't care, you got to get out of here, Whereas to me, I'd be like, well, okay, cool, like, what can you actually do for me? So there's a little bit of sort of disbelief where it's like, all right, would this character really be like, okay, I get it, you are a godmother, cool, but you still gotta go, when she's clearly bringing a lot of joy to her daughter and to other people that she meets. Julian Bell is perfectly cast for this role. Like I said, she is one of my favorite up and coming comedic actresses. I'm not sure where I first took notice of her, but there was like a 2 year period where she was in almost every PG-13 or R-rated comedy. She was in Fist Fight. She was in. I think she was in Office Christmas Party. She was in 22 Jump Street. So, she really had her claws in there. And she is a scene stealer. She really, rifles off some of the best jokes in the movie. And, she always gets these cute one liners. And I'm not even talking about this movie. I'm saying any movie she's in, she is a scene stealer. So I think she was perfectly cast for this. And Isla Fisher is, very cute as well. And sort of playing the role of, hard-assed businesswoman, doesn't want to believe, but obviously it's Disney, so again, I don't do spoilers, but you can probably imagine what happens to her cold, dead heart as we go through the movie. But I think she's cast very well also, because you do need somebody kind of that does have that icy quality to them if they need to, but then can also come around. So I thought this was funny. It's not wholly original. Like I said, Enchanted is sort of maybe the template for this, and it does most of the things better than what we see in this movie. But for what it is, I did really enjoy Godmother. I'm going to give it a B. And I will say, stick around for the credits, because there's like a hand-drawn post-credits, well, I guess it's like mid-credits sequence as sort of an epilogue. And they did that because during COVID is when they were going to be finishing up the final touches of the movie, and of course they weren't able to film it, so they went to the hand-drawn animation stuff and did the epilogue that way. And actually, it kind of works for it, because it does make it almost a little bit storybookish, so I think that added sort of another fun element to it. All right, moving on to Black Beauty. This is obviously a retelling of the story that we've seen on screen and read in the books for I don't know how many, 150 years maybe? I have no clue. But Black Beauty is not something I grew up with. I don't really know much about the general story. I know it's about, a girl and her horse. But I never saw I think Elizabeth Taylor maybe did one of the big successful versions in the 40s or 50s or something. But I am not familiar really other than that. I've never seen any of the Black Beauty movies. I didn't read the book. And really, I'm not that into horse stories in general. I've seen a few that I think are decent. I really liked War Horse, Steven Spielberg's movie, but obviously that was a little bit, different. That was more of a war drama, and this is more of a I Love Animals type of drama. I don't know what you'd call this, but, it's just a girl and her horse type drama. So the movie is basically actually from Black Beauty's perspective, and she is voiced by Kate Winslet, so we hear all of her inner thoughts, the inner monologue, and then Mackenzie Foy, who's becoming, I guess, somewhat of a Disney darling, because she was the star of The Nutcracker and the Four Realms a couple of years ago. She's now a little bit older. She's like 14 or 15 here, and she plays Jo Green, who is the owner, really, of this Mustang called Black Beauty. And basically, it's a story of some animal cruelty. We see Black Beauty in what they want her to be, and what she actually is. And there's, it's a lot of like Disney PG style, tragedy. Like there's a car accident where the owner, or the trainer, I should say, John, dies, and so that's sort of throwing things into a question of like, okay, well, who's going to train Black Beauty, and what's going to happen, and whatever, and, she keeps getting sort of sold to different people throughout the movie, which a little bit reminded me of The Dog's Purpose, where in that case, the dog just kept dying over and over again, which was, horribly sad. Big tearjerker there, but, kept having the same head space. Josh Gad was the voice of the dog the whole movie. And so here, Black Beauty doesn't continue to die, but, she keeps getting sold to different people, and all the while, having Joe, the Mackenzie Foy character, in her head as okay, like we need to get back to her. But in the midst, we see some, like I said, animal cruelty things and stuff like that. So because it's an old story, it does take place. I don't think it takes place quite as long ago as the book was written, which is the 1800s, I think the 1870s. It doesn't take place that long ago, I don't think, but I would say maybe early 1900s, like not too long probably after it takes place. This movie is a real mixed bag for me. I thought Kate Winslet's narration was kind of lifeless, and I'm a huge Kate Winslet fan. I mean, Titanic, one of my all-time favorite movies. But aside from that, she's obviously done some great work in so many other movies. But here, I thought she was actually kind of flat. It was almost like I don't listen to a lot of books on tape, but or however audiobooks, I guess you'd call it now. What am I, 100? But I feel like she was almost just reading the Black Beauty novel, and she was doing the audiobook for it. It just was kind of flat, and for Kate Winslet, you don't expect that. In fact, I didn't even know it was Kate Winslet until about halfway through the movie. I was like, I kind of recognize that voice. I want to look up who it was. And it was Kate, and I'm like, oh boy, I didn't get that vibe at all. Like, so that was definitely a turnoff. Also, I don't love stories where we hear the narration of the animals. I think it's sort of a corny plot device. I think it's sort of cheap to try and wring emotions from us. And there are only a few exceptions of movies that I really can get behind that use that motif. I really enjoyed Babe. Um, I don't mind A Dog's Purpose, the Josh Gad movie. It's okay, but like I think about ones that have come out the last few years, like Art of Racing in the Rain. The other one that was trying to be Dog's Purpose, was that called A Dog's Way Home? Maybe. Um, there's like a whole handful of them recently, and so for me to just hear what's in Black Beauty's head all the time, I get it. I know what they're trying to do, but for me, it was just very flat with between the narration and just a trope that I don't particularly care for anyway. And obviously, like, okay, fine, we get it. Animal cruelty is horrible. They're supposed to be the bad guys, but they're almost cartoonish in their badness. So this one, is my least favorite of the four that I watched. Look, if you love horses and you love this kind of thing, and you're a fan of the novel or some of the older Black Beauty movies, I think you will get a lot more out of this than I did. So take my grade with a grain of salt. But if nothing else, I think just the emotionless narration of Winslet might even be enough to turn off the biggest Black Beauty fans out there. I don't know. Not having seen any of the other ones to compare, I'm not sure, and I'm not even sure if that's the same way they did it. I don't know if they did it from the Black Beauty perspective. I don't know if they did a voiceover or anything like that. I only have this one to go off of, and it was not good for me. I'll leave it with a C minus. And then finally, we've got Clouds. This is a very heart-tugging, emotional film from the Disney machine. And it's based on a real story, just like Safety is. And this is about this kid, Zach Sobiech, with cancer. And he really has about 6 to 9 months to live is what he's given at the beginning pretty much of his senior year, or maybe the end of his junior year. But so we see pretty much the remainder of that time. And in the midst of everything, he is a struggling musician, and he decides to put pen to paper after he, is really trying to cope with losing his hair and being sort of sick all the time, and feeling alienated from his friends because he's not able to do a lot of the things that they're able to do. He walks on crutches and this and that, the other thing. He has in his final thing, he has a collapsed lung, and we learn, oh, your treatments are no longer effective. Here's your diagnosis, and so it starts out like right away. We're just thrown into this emotional mix. The kid, by the way, Zach, is played by Finn Argus, who I'm not super familiar with, but Sabrina Carpenter is Sammy, his best friend and songwriting partner. And I saw her recently in some cheerleading movie. I want to say it was on Hulu, maybe. And I thought it was okay, but mostly I know her from her singing. I mean, she has, a pretty pop and singing career. And then the parents here are played by Tom Everett Scott and Nev Campbell, and Lil Rel Howery is Zach's teacher as well, who is really, a great mentor for him outside of his family and friends. But as we go along here, he ends up writing this song Clouds, which becomes huge, #1 on iTunes and everything. Covered by all these people like Jason Mraz and other people like that, who, by the way, Jason Mraz appears as himself in the movie at a concert. But look, I was not familiar with this story. I didn't know the song Clouds. I didn't know Zach's story. So this was all kind of new to me. And I think there are definitely ways to wring some emotional moments out of a kid with a sickness kind of movie, Fault in Our Stars or 5 Feet Apart. And I think those movies maybe did some things a little bit better than this one. For one thing, I think the emotional moments are too heavy hitting. I think everything is just so wrung out with like, feel this emotion, feel this emotion, feel this emotion, that for me it was almost like angering. I was like, okay, I get it. Like, this dude is about to die and it's horrible and this and that and the other thing. But at the same time, like, you're really beating me over the head with it. Let me sort of become invested in the character, not just because, well, he's got cancer, he's going to die. Oh, he wrote this song that was popular. Like, let me actually know the person a little bit better, which I don't think we necessarily do. We get to know him some, but I feel like it's all very surfacey stuff, and he's made out to be this, like, just saint-like figure that is just like, well, he never, does anything wrong. He never makes a mistake. He's just a perfect person. How could cancer do this to him? This and that. And look, I get it. I mean, cancer sucks. We've all, I'm sure, lost people that are very close to us to cancer. But I think people also have flaws, and this person does not seem to. So that's one issue. Another issue I had with it was that there's a few different, like, moments of other people having some issues. Like, for example, there's a moment where his parents are arguing because, they're obviously very stressed out about, losing their son and this and that. And so they kind of fight with each other, but, like, the fight never gets resolved, and then it's never talked about again. Like, in the next scene, everything's fine, everybody's eating. It's like, all right, well, why even put that in there, just for some, like, tension? All right, well, give me... there's a little bit of tension with Zach and his girlfriend, Amy. I will say that. We have, I think, the most tense moments other than the cancer, coming from that. But, like, the Tom Everett Scott and Nev Campbell, it's like, they're so bland, so they're like, well, let's give them something to do. Let's give them a big fight. So then they fight, and then it just never gets talked about again. One other thing that happens that I think it had to be done purposely, because it was almost like shot for shot what happens in this other movie. But Tom Everett Scott is in a movie which is one of my all-time top 10 favorite movies, That Thing You Do, a Tom Hanks movie. And the moment where the Wonders in that movie first hear their song That Thing You Do on the radio, Liv Tyler's running down the street, and she's like, coming into the guy's appliance store. She's like, oh my God, like, we're on the radio, whatever. They do almost the exact same routine in this movie when they first hear Clouds on the radio. Nev Campbell's character is the first one to hear it. And I don't know if that is purposeful because Tom Everett Scott is in this movie and he's in That Thing You Do. Like, is it a wink and a nod to that? Or is it just some blatant ripoff? I'm not sure. I think it has to be done on purpose, but, like, it just seemed kind of cheap. Like, That Thing You Do did it so perfectly, and this just seemed like a copycat version. So that was a negative for me as well. It was only, one small scene, but it really kind of brought the movie down a little bit for me. So overall, look, I think this is a good movie, but it's far from a great movie. I think it's very hard to do the whole dying teen story. I think most of the movies I see in that sort of genre end up on the high end, like a B or a B plus maybe. I can't think of any really that I've given an A to. Maybe I'm just not remembering, but most of them sort of fall in that range. I think this falls on the lower end of that, um, but still serviceable. I think people maybe could get emotional watching this movie. That's certainly their goal. I'm just not sure it affected me as much as they were really, really trying for it to. And I'm certainly not a stone. I watched an episode of This Is Us earlier and was crying about that. So, I cry in movies for sure. But this one, I think they were just trying too hard with it. So I'm going to leave Clouds with a C plus. All right, so that is the Disney Plus 2020 wrap up. There's no more movies on there that I haven't reviewed. There's actually one that did come out, Secret Society of something or other, but it was a Disney Channel co-production, so I feel like, that's not really on the theatrical level of some of these other movies. Disney Channel sort of has their own brand. It's, I don't review Lifetime Christmas movies either on the channel, so I think we're going to skip that. But Disney Plus now for 2020 is wrapped up. I have a lot more ground to cover though with different platforms. HBO Max, I have a video coming for that. I think I want to handle the small acts movies on Amazon as well, sort of in a lump sum. So there's a bunch of that coming. I'm going to be doing 2020 movies for at least another month or so. I usually allow myself 5 or 6 weeks into the new year to catch up on all the 2020 movies I missed. And there's still a few big ones that are like being buzzed about for awards that I haven't gotten to yet. Hillbilly Elegy was clearly gunning for awards, and then it got critically trashed, but I still want to see that. Amy Adams and what Glenn Close, I think, is in it. Ron Howard directed it. So that's one certainly I want to get to. And there's a lot more sort of in that vein where it's like maybe they're being talked about for awards buzz, and I just haven't gotten to it yet. And other indie movies as well that I'd like to see. So anyway, for now, that is it. Thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.